Can we get third-party watch faces? No. Can we please get third-party watch faces?
No.
Can we get third-party watch faces? No. Can we get some third-party watch faces? Cycle tracking. Okay, alright, how about third-party watch faces? Try again later. Do I even bother asking anymore at this point? No, it's pointless. Then what do I even ask for? Well, let's begin. So yeah, I have no clue why Apple wants to leave this potential market off to the sidelines, because frankly, think of how much money Apple makes from the iOS App Store and then apply that to how many people out there would probably even pay to have custom watch faces designed by creative developers out there. And I'm not saying that anybody can post one. Just like the apps on the iOS App Store, it could be something that Apple has to vet and approve and make sure is safe and not going to damage the watch in any way, shape, or form. But I think there would be tons of people willing to spend money on decent watch faces that different brands or different developers could come up with. Apple could take a 30% cut of every one of those sales. I actually think it would be far more popular and far more common than the watchOS App Store, which it's cool that you can get third-party applications for your watch, but frankly, I don't use any, and I don't know of that many people that use third-party apps on their Apple Watch. I mean, the native, default apps pretty much cover what an Apple Watch is useful for. But regardless, we've been asking for it for so long, and it still hasn't happened, so that's why I'm shifting today's video's focus over to something Mark Gurman leaked, who apparently has sources claiming that they know what's happening with watchOS 9. It mostly sounds like a typical, average update with, oh, we came up with a handful of new watch faces, and there's some new heart tracking features and some new health features. He even went as far as to say there's gonna be, satellite communications features, which I don't even think the Apple Watch has the hardware for yet. Maybe that's what they're saving for the Series 8, is letting the iPhone and the watch communicate with low Earth orbit satellites, but they've been claiming that for a while and it hasn't happened. But the one thing that I got really excited for is a revamped version of power reserve mode with more customizable toggles. The reason this stood out to me is because every single year people pretty much have the same exact request for new Apple Watch hardware, which is, can we get better battery life? There's so many other smartwatches out there that can get longer battery life than the Apple Watch can, but again, I think the main reason the Apple Watch doesn't isn't because the milliamp hours are substantially lower than the competition's. They're actually pretty on par with most other smartwatches out there. The difference is Apple does not want to compromise on the fluidity and responsiveness of the UI, which just means that the graphics and the processor are pretty power hungry, even for Apple Silicon, relative to what the competitors do, which is put in the most basic, slow, cheap processor they can, and that allows for great battery life, but it usually comes at the cost of the UI being laggy and slow. Firmware updates take forever, and overall it just worsens the entire experience of the watch, and that's why they typically don't sell as well. But what I've been thinking for a while now is that, well, isn't it possible that you could kind of dumb down or scale back on the user interface being so graphic intensive and stop making the Apple Watch do so many things in the background and try to make the most out of the battery that they do ship in this thing? And that's kind of what Gurman is referencing, this concept that, you could activate power reserve but still have access to certain apps and certain functions that are mandatory. The current power reserve mode is okay, but I honestly don't think it gets used that much because, frankly, what it does is turn the watch into basically just the time. It won't do anything else in the background, and when you do that, you can typically get the battery life to last 3 days or longer, but raise to wake doesn't work, texting doesn't work, and you have to basically press a button on the side just to see what time it is. But if they could revamp power reserve mode to actually allow for certain tasks that people probably need their watches to do in emergencies, like being able to text or being able to get a certain notification. Maybe the taptics don't have to be as rigorous, and of course the always on display can be off. The refresh rate could be dropped substantially lower, maybe even 10 hertz or something, so that the watch looks like low bit rate and kind of matrixy, where everything is green and the time lights up as few pixels as possible, so that you can still prioritize battery life in a pinch, but if someone needs to reach you or you need your watch for communication purposes, it can still fall back and do that. So having some kind of upgraded version of low power mode, I think, would absolutely incentivize a lot of people to want watchOS 9 on their watch, because especially with more and more people doing sleep tracking, getting that watch battery to last you throughout several days is quite beneficial. Now, just because I don't have the always on display on my watch, I could typically get mine to last around 2 days, but if you were stopping all of the blood oxygen and heart rate monitoring in the background, turning off raise ways to wake and making the refresh rate a lot lower and the brightness a lot lower, but still letting people text or get a couple notifications here and there. I would love to see how much longer the battery life could potentially be, because that's pretty much the one weakness the Apple Watch has on everybody else in the industry. And yes, it would be impressive if you could match the battery life of the competition just purely on software optimization, which probably is too much wishful thinking. It likely won't be that good. I mean, it probably won't be like 2-week battery life, but there's a lot of people out there that are buying these watches and finding out that, oh, the battery health has deteriorated within just a couple years and now it can't get me through the day. So if there was a way to prioritize how many cycles were on your watch and prolong its lifespan, I think a lot of people would be happy and not feel like they have to upgrade the watch so often. But honestly, that's probably a bad thing for Apple. So I can understand maybe why they haven't implemented that quite yet, especially because it's going to get progressively harder and harder for Apple to come up with meaningful upgrades to the Apple Watch line. But hey, this is why Timmy introduced Fitness Plus, is because they're trying to pivot everybody to more software services. And I think even if watchOS 9 does not have a great low power mode, people are still gonna have a hard time justifying upgrading to new Apple Watches. So they may have just accepted defeat on that front, so might as well just prioritize battery health for all these watches if at all possible. But between third-party watch faces and low power mode, that's pretty much all I'm looking for in watchOS 9. Don't really need to do a whole separate wish list because there's not much else I would change. It's very capable of taking advantage of the hardware that it's presently on, unlike another Apple product out there that's missing a calculator app. But hey, even the watchOS team accommodated the weather and calculator on tiny displays. I'm starting to think that the Apple Watch is going to get Final Cut before the iPad does. But if you have other requests for watchOS 9, feel free to let me know in the comments below. This is your Alp Sheep here. I'll see you all in the next one.